so many people don't even know what their intuition looks like, what it feels like. They don't know the difference between intuition and fear. They don't know how to even begin to listen to that.
All right, so welcome to another episode of the Jacque Show, and I'm going to say it for the first time, and we're just going to call you Jenna from here on out. But we've got Dr. Jenna here with us, who is somebody that before we hit the record button, I've been so excited to talk to and interview you because of, with my fertility side of things, where I help patients carry through their fertility journeys into pregnancy, into the post-pregnancy. But something that not a lot of people talk about is, what do you do after you have kids? So she has this, it's a program that you have, right? The Nurtured Nursery would be considered a program, right? And you're able to kind of teach and tell people like what to expect and how to do this. And it was birthed out of a thing of love and a thing of passion, because you kind of learned from your first pregnancy how you wanted to have your second. So we'll dive in, but I wanted to first say thank you so much for jumping on the show here today. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. So what got you into where you're at today? What brought about this whole Nurtured Nursery? Fill me in.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I feel a lifelong accumulation of where I started. So I was born and raised in Western Colorado, and I experienced in like high school, I experienced some major trauma, emotional, mental, and it was a big time for me. And what that led to was some serious dis-ease in my body. It led to some physical manifestations of that trauma. And I started to just get really, really sick. It was so bad that I thought for sure at that time that it was all a physical issue. I thought, I have something wrong with me and I need to figure it out.
That's what we're taught, though. That's what we're taught. It has to be physical.
Totally. And so I did all the things, like I went to doctors and they did all the tests. They did the colonoscopy, the endoscopy, this test, that test, and everything came back normal. And I'm like, that can't be. That can't be. I'm so sick. I was losing weight like crazy. I was vomiting multiple times a week. And It was oftentimes I'd wake up just in the middle of the night, just so sick. Yeah. And that took me through the next decade of my life. I got married, went to college, got my bachelor's degree in chemistry because that was the logical thing to do at that time. I was like, well, I like chemistry. Okay. So I think that's what I'll go for. So I did that. And then at the end of my bachelor's degree, something said, I don't know what's next. I don't know how to make this move. So why don't I just go get my PhD in chemistry? What else should I do? I'll make more money. I'll probably like what I'm doing a little bit more. So my husband and I, we moved across the state and I applied to grad school. I got in, I started my PhD program, and a month later found out I was pregnant with my daughter, my first daughter. And at that time, I had no idea what I was going to do. Yeah. I didn't know if I should continue. I didn't know if I should just say, okay, this is a sign, stop now. I didn't know if my program was going to be okay with it. Yeah. And luckily they were.
Good.
Yeah. So I said, well, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do both of these things. I'm going to create a human. I'm going to birth this human, and I am going to just continue my PhD and along this journey. And in that pregnancy, I was miserable. It was so physically hard on me.
Yeah.
I was just struggling in every way. I was struggling emotionally and mentally, and to get my work done in my first year of my PhD, and my body was suffering. I was so sick. I just couldn't I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I said there was this big wake up call. Like there's something wrong. And still at this point, I'm thinking it's a physical thing.
Yeah.
There's some diagnosis, something to figure out.
Right.
And what I started to do is made some changes in like my diet and that kind of thing. And I saw some small improvements, but through the pregnancy, it was about survival.
Yeah.
Just get through this. And my first baby, she was teeny tiny. She was 5 pounds, 12 ounces at birth.
Wow. Okay.
And so through the entire pregnancy, the doctors were pretty concerned. Like she's not growing the way we'd expect her to. And it was a fairly quote unquote normal pregnancy as far as the health doctor medical side of things go.
Sure. Until
I was 36 weeks pregnant. And then all of a sudden they started to get alarmed at her size and that, 10 babies tend to, especially in that last month, just really chunk up.
Yeah.
And that wasn't happening. So it led me to get induced. And after birthing her, it was this moment of realizing I literally cannot live this way. I can't continue to be miserable in so many ways. And I also started to realize that I wasn't just physically miserable, that also something was going on with me where I just wasn't happy. I wasn't content. And I could see from the outside, I love my life. I love my husband. I love my daughter. I'm good with going for my PhD. I never really loved that.
Yeah.
But I was like, I have a good life. We're doing good things. And something's wrong. So I joined this like health-based MLM kind of, I think about a year and a half after my first daughter was born.
Sure.
And that led me to personal development. And all of a sudden it was this just light bulb moment of, whoa, there's a lot more inside of me that is happening. There's a lot of emotional, mental issues that I've been suppressing, that I haven't been dealing with, that I need to do some serious work and deal with what I've been through and start to just acknowledge and be aware of what was going on fully. And then that kind of took me down the route of spirituality. I started to really get into my own spirituality and what that looked like for me. And then I went through my first spiritual awakening. And all of a sudden I had this new perspective on life of how to be, act, see the world. And then I started to combine this very scientific, logical side of myself with the more spiritual. And that led me to kind of deciding that I wasn't living in full alignment. I wasn't living in a place that made me happy fully. And so right about that time was 2019, end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And so that was a crazy time.
Not a stressful time. Yeah.
Yeah. So what ended up being a great time for me is being forced to just sit with myself and open my eyes and deal with it, to start the process of uncovering and alchemizing all that I had been through in my past and bringing it into my present in a way that served me and not held me down and held me back. And at that point, I started to look at things differently I started listening to podcasts and reading books and working with a naturopathic doctor and just doing things so much differently. Mm-hmm. And it made so much sense to me. It was like, this is what I've been missing. Why would I have not had access to this? Why didn't I not know about this whole different side of life? Mm-hmm. And I made so many improvements through that, but I was still struggling, with my health. And at that time I got pregnant. So early-ish 2020, I think about April, May is when I got pregnant with my second daughter.
Gotcha.
And that is when everything shifted for me. It was still physically hard on me, but so much different than my last pregnancy, because I started to do everything holistically.
Awesome.
From the food that I ate, to the birth that I was choosing, to the care that I was choosing, to the way that we were creating our spaces, and everything in our home, everything around us. It was just a complete shift of perspective and how to do life and how to be. And that is really what birthed this idea of sharing this knowledge with other moms and other parents. Having my second baby and just completely taking a different approach to pregnancy, birth, and creating our lives, our spaces, is really what led me to creating Nurtured Nursery and starting my business in general. Is that whole shift.
And that's the thing too, where we talked about before we hit the record button the first time. But we have that really strong why. We have that message that, I feel like a lot of people, especially moms, like women just in general are wicked powerful individuals. And I feel like, throughout society and times and stuff, like man has done a very good job of like, shh, like don't let your light shine, just shush and look pretty in the corner. Like that's my personal opinion. And I see, and I work with a lot of women who, through the spiritual aspect of things, like we're doing stuff from, like a functional medicine and a naturopathic type discipline. But then, I find my time a lot of the times where I'm like, the protocol is easy. Like I know where we're going with like the physical, like you talked about, but then I'll just dive in. We'll just go into just like mindset coaching. Trauma comes up and I'm like, oof, okay, we're unpacking this. And then the next month they're like, look, I'm so much healthier. And like my adrenals are happy again. And I'm like, well, you unpacked all this stuff. And there's like this beautiful art to it, because you get to see already powerful women blossom into even stronger women who then are able to set the healthy boundaries or make those proper health decisions for themselves. And it just, I don't know, to me, I don't think there's anything like, yes, I love working with guys too, but like to see that happen, there's just so much room for improvement, I think, out there. And moms past like just being a woman is like, holy cow, the amount of pressure and then not knowing what to do. And then I know when we had our son, like Megan had she had a uterine fibroid cut off 6 months prior to us meeting. And the pregnancy process was stressful just because we knew we wanted to do something natural. We didn't want, all the typical medical interventions, but we were going to go into a birth center. Like that was our goal. And then we went in there and these nurses were looking through her chart notes from the surgery that she had, which I had already read. And they're like, oh, you're high risk. You're going to end up in C-section hospital delivery. And we're like, what? No, that's not what we want. So we had to keep like shopping around. And then Megan felt called to do a home birth. I'm like, is that what you want? I'm like, I have no problems with that at all. But if that's what you want, like, let's do it. Let's get it set up. The first birth that we had was stressful. There's a lot of the generational trauma that was like coming up that she wasn't even aware of. Then she did some self-work afterwards. And then the second kid we had, Sage, our daughter, was like a completely different pregnancy, and she's a completely different child too. So like, I feel like the more women can prep through before pregnancy as well as during pregnancy, reduce the stress down, you're less likely to have a cortisol driven baby. That's again, my opinion and what I see with a lot of my patients as well. So I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing, but I want to dive into it more. So when we talk about like Nurtured Nursery, what all do you look into? What type of advice and things like that do you give people to be able to empower them to be the best parents possible?
Yeah. So my program is a self-guided, self-paced program. So I give 7 different steps, and looking at each of those. So they're basically just different areas of a baby's environment, of what they're consuming, what's around them, what's on their bodies, And then I talk about what types of toxins that they can look for, how to maybe eliminate or avoid those toxins, how to even just in our own bodies to take care of them while we're pregnant. And then I approach everything through what I call the mama method. So there's basically 4 steps that you can look through each of these different aspects and really create for you, because every single person is different, an aligned space or environment for your own kids or babies. So the mama method is method. So the first M is for method. So that is basically how you are exposed. So the route of exposure, whether that direct through something they're consuming or direct through body contact, or if it's indirect, like say through breast milk or something along those lines. And then I talk about the second thing to consider is the amount. So how often are they exposed? How much are they exposed to? And then the third is managing or maintaining this. So is this possible for you to actually implement into your life, or are you trying to set goals that are completely unrealistic for you? And can we make this happen? And then the fourth and final in mama method is align. So is this aligned with your lifestyle? Is this aligned with your financial place in life? Is this aligned with your goals and your aspirations where you are? So that's kind of how I approach each of these 7 different steps. And then hopefully what they're able to do is then work through the second part is a workbook. So they're able to then work through that on their own time and at their own pace. And they're able to determine these 4 different aspects of these 7 steps.
Okay. What would you, if you had to say, what do most moms struggle with the most when we're talking about the mama method?
I think it probably depends a little bit too, if this is like a first baby or if it's further down the line.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me in my first pregnancy and through the entire process, pregnancy, birth, and then being a mom, it was kind of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
I didn't even know where to look for information. I didn't know how to go about any of this. So you're kind of in this place of, I have to make some big decisions for another life, and I'm going to do the best that I can, but also how do I even start? And so I don't know if it's one area in particular, but I think that what's so powerful about having something like the mama method or any type of exposure to looking at pregnancy, birth, and being a mom through a more holistic lens, I think that is the biggest key, is having the access to that information.
Yeah, there's a lot of information online, and you can get stuck in what I call like the mother, father, preacher, teacher type side of things, where everyone else's expectations of how you were raised or how you're supposed to do it, and then this outside expectation of you're not living up to what I told you to do, so now you're failing. And then moms are like, what do I do? And then they try one thing and it's like, hey, like for a diaper rash, put this on your baby. And you're like, well, I thought I read that that's toxic to the babies and it can cause cancer. Well, that's what I used for you. And then it's like, but I read here, and then you tried it, and it's like, there's so much information. It's like you're getting hit with a power, like a fire hose of information as soon as you have this kid. And already, like you said, just like, that you're pregnant, that you're creating life. But when you see what you created, it's completely different. And then it sits in and you're like, oh man. Or like when you were in your instance, like, I know something's wrong with me. I'm like, some sort of dis-ease is taking place in my body. I was having trouble taking care of myself, and now I'm responsible for 2. Like, what do I do here? So I would agree with you. And what I see with a lot of my patients and stuff is that there is this societal pressure to do it one way or another way. Or like, I work with a lot of Amish patients, and the Amish patients can sometimes be the hardest to work with because they have very large families and they're very vocal about what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to raise. And I'm like, Like, I'm just going to be that guy to tell you to do things a little bit differently. Like, listen to your gut, listen to your intuition. And if you're doing something, you're like, I don't think I agree with that. It's okay to say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to go over here and try this. So to have something where, you take in the socioeconomic, like the status, like what you're able to afford, which is very important because you can get lost in that and you overspend. And then that could be a different stress that, hits you as well. But to be able to put that and quantify that and be like, okay, this can work for you. After you go through this whole method here, this could work for you. Give it a shot and, do your own workbook, work through this, and then make sure, because you don't want to spend all that time, money, and effort working on something for it not to last. You want to make sure that you latch onto it. And I think, and you might feel the same way about this, but also don't be afraid to screw up. Like if you're like, oh, like I messed up. Like today I had a crappy day. I got a bad night's sleep. Kid was up 47 times last night and I don't have the energy to work today. And I know I should be raising you this way, but I'm just going to do a mulligan day where it's like, we're just going to get through. We're going to get to bedtime. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be an early bedtime for you, but we'll start again tomorrow. Like, I feel like that a lot of moms need that permission to hit the reset on the day to start again tomorrow. I think that's something that's big as well.
Oh, I totally agree. There are so many things that happen in life that are unpredictable. Mm-hmm. We can plan and hope that things are going to go a certain way, all we want. And some part of that is going to come true. And some part of that is just going to be a crapshoot. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to pivot and decide what we're going to do, what we're going to do with that. And like you said, sometimes it's like, that's all I got today. Yeah. That is all I got.
I feel like you have to have like I told Megan, I'm like, you have to have the quarterback mentality. And she's like, I don't really know what that is. I'm like, well, quarterbacks, if they screw up in football and they throw an interception, you can't go out the next series and be worried about throwing an interception again. You have to forget about it. It has to go out and go away. And we just went camping this weekend, and this was a prime example of it. It was pure chaos. Like the expectations were already low, and we're like, we don't have any expectations anymore. Mommy and daddy are completely beat. We're defeated. Let's just survive through the night. We did not come prepared, and we'll be better this week. But honestly, like the way that the kids have behaved from Monday to Thursday, they night and day different. I have no idea if it was like, hey, they just need some fresh air or something, but their behaviors are great. They're super nice, super kind. Like I don't know, but if we would have just hung on to how bad the weekend was, we would have carried that into the week, and it would have been very difficult to continue to be parents. So anyways, I digress a little bit. Yeah. little therapy session. Oh my gosh. So when you talk about, the Mama Method, you got that piece of it, designing the safer spaces. How do you approach, like when you approach the spirituality side of things, how do you approach that with new moms? And then do you also have that permeate through to the kids as well for like things for mom to teach the kid?
Yeah. So that's actually a really great question. So when I really pivoted into deciding I'm going to basically, I don't want to say throw away because I'm not throwing away my PhD, but when I decided to really go in a different direction, mm-hmm. I also had this side of me that really clung on to being logical and to being approaching business and what I was going to put out into the world from this very analytical, information-based side of me, which I very much identified with for so long.
Yeah.
And so when I created Nurtured Nursery, I created it more from this perspective of here's the information, do with it what you want. So I wish I would have really combined more of my own spirituality and then mm-hmm. pass that on to those really consuming this. But I'd say the closest that I get in Nurtured Nursery to that is really just this align piece. And for me, that is aligning in every aspect. So you might decide, well, I would like my kid to only wear organic clothing. But I don't think I can afford all organic clothing, but I don't maybe have access to all organic clothing, but there's all these other factors that go into it. And just knowing that, being aware of that, and deciding where you go from there. Okay, maybe I only want organic sleepwear. They sleep in that for 12 hours plus, and then maybe I'm changing their clothes during the day multiple times. Maybe they're going free diaper, just running around their diapers sometimes.
That's what ours do. If we're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you're just like, I can't put clothing on you because you're just going to strip it off anyway.
Yep.
Or get it messy or stain or whatever. So it's just kind of approaching it from that perspective of I want this to fit into my lifestyle. And I want it to feel really good. I want it to feel consciously chosen, and I want it to feel really good for me. And deciding that I need to have all organic clothing for my kids is actually going to put a lot of stress on me because I can't afford it, or I can't even access it. It's not something that is convenient for me. And really deciding that for yourself and going through the entire process, thinking in that way is, I think, the closest I really get to combining spirituality into this program. But for my own life, I love to really bring that to my kids as well, just in sharing my own beliefs or sharing what I do with them, even if they don't quite understand it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. Obviously, I love the fact that you're again putting it into, is this doable, and then reducing as much stress as humanly possible, and again removing that guilt with it, which would then cause an increase in stress. But the way that you're able to talk and communicate to your kids and say like, hey, this is what mommy does. Mommy's a boss. Like I run my own thing. Yeah, I went and got my PhD. It's on pause right now. Maybe I'll use it later or maybe not, but it's okay to set out there and change course. And I think for this upcoming generation, I think now more than ever, our generation is like breaking the 9 to 5. I think that's like what our generation should be kind of called, is like, listen, like we don't do the 9 to 5s anymore. It's not working for us. We do virtual, we make courses, we do programs, we do all of this stuff because we want to live fulfilled lives. We want to spend time with our families, and we want that congruency. We want it so badly. So I'm so glad this is here, but where has it been like this entire time, and
yeah,
I wish we would have known about this, 3 years ago, or, 3-4 years ago now, to like, just to add into and prep for this. Cause again, like there's just so much pressure. There really is. So to have that resource is perfect. And I know that when we're transitioning from pregnancy to parenthood, reducing the stress, and then I have more of like a personal question into this as well, because you're married, right? So when you were like, hey, hubby, I'm not going to pursue my PhD. I'm just going to go and I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do this. Was there a lot of support with that?
Yes, actually,
Awesome.
I'm very lucky in that aspect, because I feel more like my circle outside of my husband was like, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
like,
that was the part 2 of the question.
Yeah. You went to school for 30 years to get your PhD in chemistry, and you could get a job and you could be making $100K a year to start off with.
Yeah.
And now you're going to start your own business doing what exactly? How are you going to make money? Most businesses fail in the first year. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that there was no support, but it was a lot of that questioning and concern. And from their perspective, protection.
Yeah.
They want me and my family to live a good life and to have the things we need.
Right.
But my husband, he is actually an entrepreneur himself.
Oh, awesome.
So it worked out really well. He knew what it was like to decide that he didn't want to be in the grind every single day and work for somebody else, when he had the same vision that he could create something and make a place that is so much greater for the people that work for him, that he could just take off running. And his type of business is very different. He is a service-based business. So he does asbestos abatement.
Yeah.
So very, very different than this whole like,
A little bit.
yeah. So it's been different in that way. It's harder to navigate the differences between the two because we'd like it to be simple and just be able to relate on every aspect, but that's not how it's gone.
Yeah. And that's the reason I asked that too, is anytime somebody steps out and pivots like that, it's always curious to see, because it's like sometimes it can completely derail a relationship. And I wasn't trying to bait you and be like, yeah, we fell apart, but like it can either ruin it or it can breathe life into it, and to have your husband also be in that entrepreneurial space and understand the stress and understand, was he in the entrepreneurial space before you pivoted?
Yeah, he
Okay.
started back in like 2019.
Okay. So you probably saw through him the stresses of getting up and running and doing those things. And yes, you're an entrepreneur as well, but there are some similarities between, the service industry and what you're doing, and like the hustle and the grind and the lack of sleep and the anxiety that comes with it, and being a mom, like
Yeah.
all this stuff just stacks up. But to get that support, it's such a beautiful thing. And Megan and I talk about it all the time. There's so many entrepreneurs that are out there that they ruin their relationships by pursuing their dreams, and it sounds like it's the exact opposite with you, which is, again, it's a beautiful thing. It gives you time to spend more time with your family and do what brings you joy. So I applaud you 1,000% for making that pivot. And if you never use that PhD, who cares? It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, I use what I did a little bit in that, just a lot of research. I'm
Yeah.
great at at finding information and piecing things together, and really looking from that perspective of, is the data actually here?
Mm-hmm.
And also just going in a completely different direction. And it was terrifying at first. Like, do I really, really want to do this? But I didn't want to live that life where I was wishing or regretting or missing out on my family's lives and my kids' lives, and just seeing them grow. Like for my second, I actually was able to be home with her for the entire first year of her life.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was huge, and it was so special. And with my first 8 weeks after she's born, she's in daycare full time, and I'm missing out on so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know from when we had Hoyt, we weren't ready. I mean, I don't want to say we weren't ready. We weren't mentally ready to have a kid at that point. And I was just like, hey, we just got the business up and running. Like, I got to grind and grind and grind. And Megan still busts my chops because she gave birth on like a Monday or something like that. And on Tuesday, I was back to work. And she was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I gotta work. But then when we had Sage, our daughter, I'm like, all right, I'll take some time off. And again, I only work 16 hours a week now. So I'm home, all afternoon. I get to hang out with the kids and do super fun stuff. I take off Fridays so we can go and travel and do whatever we want. So it's one of those things where, again, that was a pain point for me where, when he was born, like I loved him. He's like my little dude, but like, I missed out on a good bit in that first, couple months to a year. I'm like, man, like I wish I could get that back. So maybe I'm overcompensating now. I'm not mad about it, but maybe developing a little codependency for him. But
Yeah,
it's a whole different thing. So I know that you have some other stuff that you are currently doing. You have two main things. We talked about the Nurtured Nursery. Do you want to talk a little bit about the one-on-one intuitive mentorship that you do as well?
Yeah. So like I said, this huge pivot really took me through so many stages of evolution in who I am and the stories that I was carrying from so much of my life, and the experiences that I went through in high school that really started to manifest physically in my body, working through all of that and realizing that I was like so inside myself. I was so pulled within myself that I didn't even know what it was like to show up fully, authentically as myself. I was basically trying to show up for everybody else. I was always trying to make other people comfortable. I wanted to make everybody else in the room happy and sacrificing myself along the way. And so as I started this process of starting with personal development and moving into spirituality and really evolving and starting to pick apart those stories and realize how they were made, and then also how I can start to reshape them into realizing why they happened, what I was doing and protecting myself, and how I can move through that, how I can start to open myself up again and become who I am, who I desire to be. And that led me to really pivoting my business even. So I started more, like I said, from this logical place of I have to do like non-toxic living and something that's related to my PhD, because that's how people are going to trust me. And that's the only way to make sure that I'm successful, is showing people that I'm not just throwing it away and using that. And so that actually led me through this entire evolution through the last 6 months, really, from October when I launched Nurtured Nursery to now, when beginning of May, it's been this process of taking down so many layers and pulling myself out of my shell and realizing that I was so small and so within myself that I didn't even know what to do with my own business. And so I started to pivot some more and kind of moved into holistic living and spirituality and trying to combine those, but also had no idea what exactly I was doing. And early this year in 2022, I really fully decided to go for it, to go for what I truly believe and to own everything about me. And so that led me to really getting in touch with who I am, my own intuition, what that looks like for me, what that feels like for me. And that is what took me from having no idea what I was doing to just really going for it, to really embracing my passion. And so that is why I created intuitive mentorship, because so many people don't even know what their intuition looks like, what it feels like. They don't know the difference between intuition and fear. They don't know how to even begin to listen to that. And I also think there's just this misconception that it's always about this little voice inside of you, or there's only one way that it shows up. But there are actually so many different ways that it shows up for people. And so that's where I created that from, is helping women to really connect with their intuition, to see what it looks like for them, to feel what it is, whether it's in their body or if it is that little voice, and to make decisions from that place, because that is what really led me to stepping into my power, not that logical, I have to do this way.
Yeah. A plus B equals C. And you're like, okay, perfect. And then you're like, but sometimes, so, you kind of scramble it up a little bit, but that's good. And the intuitive piece of it, I think, is a little bit about what we mentioned earlier with women just kind of like turn down that intuition, turn down that gut feeling. And I think being a mom and motherhood is when your intuition should be at an all-time high. And I know that, I work with a lot of like subconscious mind stuff. Like I'm obsessed with the subconscious mind, where I'll just be like randomly doing something and all of a sudden my intuition will kick in and I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm going to go over here and do this. I'm like, wait, why did I do that? And then I sit with that for a second. I'm like, oh shoot, like that's such a good idea. Like I should have been doing that. And then I'm like, oh, now that's part of the schedule. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to approach this. Or sometimes my intuition, my voice will speak to me in the shower and I'll get like these really good ideas. I'm like, there's nothing for me to write down. Like I need like markers in a shower or something to write on that. But anyways, I love the combination of the two of these. And to me, it's a lot of women empowerment, mother empowerment, getting things back to how they should be. So where can people reach out to you, find you, learn more about you? Where can they get you?
Yeah. So Instagram is my main thing. And you can find me at JG Alchemy. And then I also have my website as well. Same thing, jgalchemy.com. And those are my main places that I like to hang out.
Awesome. And then the 2 programs and stuff that you are currently running before you probably manifest something else is going to be the Nurtured Nursery and then the one-on-one intuitive. So anybody who's listening to this, or if you listen to it 48 times, which would be awesome, but if you listen to it, if you want more information, find her on Instagram, look through her stuff. I mean, you got a beautiful page, by the way. I just want to give you kudos to that, but lots of awesome information out there. And this is something that is massively needed. So I want to try to push everybody, as many people as I can, to go to your page, guys or girls. I mean, again, women who are stuck in this, if you're a guy listening to this and you're like, man, my wife could really benefit from learning about this, because women get stuck in their own little, their little bubbles, and like, I don't know what to do. And so sometimes guys, if you can gently, don't forcefully, but gently suggest, hey, check out, Jenna's page. It looks pretty cool. And then allow that conversation to start. So again, Jenna, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm going to have a ton of follow-up questions for you too. Totally. So I'll probably be hitting you up on Instagram as well, just because there's a lot of information that I want, just from a selfish standpoint, because I love what you do. So thank you again. And we'll put all of your notes, the Instagram handles, your website and stuff, in the show notes there as well, so people can click on that and find you. But until next time then.
Yeah, I wanted to just quick mention, I did create a coupon code for any of your listeners for Nurtured Nursery. So you'll get $20 off. Just use the code DocJacque.
Okay.
And you can get $20 off. It's only $77 after the discount. So
awesome. That is very nice of you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. All right. We'll talk soon.